So a little quiz as we're getting started. I told you if you were here earlier that the next couple of weeks we're going to be talking about the care of our souls. I don't think many of us are very good at that, and so as we're getting started, I'm going to give you a little quiz. You're going to think it has nothing to do with it, but you'll see what I'm getting at hopefully in a minute. Anybody know this lady? Who is this behind me? Aretha Franklin, and she is what? She's a singer, but more than that, she's known as what? She's the Queen of Soul. She's the Queen of Soul. If you've never heard her, you need to go on Pandora or find her and listen to her music. There's a reason they call her the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. Nobody like her. How about this guy? That's James Brown. You guys are probably a little more familiar with him. If she's the Queen of Soul, what is he? He's the Godfather of Soul. She's the Queen of Soul. He's the Godfather of Soul. Okay? There's a theme now. Who's that? Billy Graham. And what is his job title? Let's call him an evangelist. And an evangelist is responsible for what?
Bringing souls to Christ.
Helping to win and save souls. Bringing souls to Christ. He's a soul winner. Okay? Queen of Soul, Godfather of Soul, soul winner. Some of you know what that is behind me, and since we're working on this theme, you would tell me that it is soul food, nothing like it. Good old Southern boy like myself brings a great deal of comfort when I see soul food. I've been eating fried chicken the last 2 nights. It's not a good for my New Year's resolution, but it sure does taste good. Okay, final one. Who's that lovely lady? That is my soulmate. That's my wife. I think she might be wearing the same shirt too. No, that's my soulmate, the one who God gave me, who I am so blessed to have. Queen of Soul, Godfather of Soul, soul winner, soul food, soulmate. You hear the word soul a lot, don't you? In everyday language. But just what is the soul? I want for you for a moment to think about it, because the word is used in a variety of different ways. I've only scratched the surface. There are many other ways in which this word will be used. But I want you to think about what exactly it is, because I'm going to propose that it is the most important thing about who you are, your soul. And so as we're getting started this morning, I'd like for you to turn to your neighbor and tell them what you believe the soul is. What is the soul? I'm going to give you just 30 seconds. What is the soul? Okay. All righty, let's come on back. So I'm sure you're all right. I'm sure you all know just exactly what the soul is. But I'm just going to define it according to what the Scriptures tell us it is. And maybe we're close. You know how a lot of times you'll know what a word means, but you can't really exactly define it? I hope to give you an insight, because this morning I'm going to be talking about the danger of losing our souls. I think it's a very real possibility in the world that we live that we can lose our souls. Jesus thought so too. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The soul, according to the Old Testament and the New Testament, is the central life force that exists within us. It's what makes us unique. And it's what helps us to integrate our minds and our bodies and our will. It brings them into a sense of alignment and wholeness when we're operating in a healthy place. Now, what's this? A light bulb. When our soul is damaged or lost, we're like a light bulb without electricity. But when we are operating at full capacity, it's like we're turned on, right? They're the same thing, but they're different, aren't they? This has no life. This has life and light. It's like this. What is this? It's a candle, but it's not really a candle until what happens? Let's see if I can light it. It's not really a candle. It doesn't really have great value until it's lit. And so much like a light bulb or a candle, our body houses our soul, which is the most important part about who we are. And it's eternal. Long after our bodies die, our souls will go on. They will live, and they will one day take on a new body, a resurrection body, which is what we'll talk about at a different time. But our souls are the central life force. They are the essence of who we are and how God made each of us uniquely. And as we're getting started today, I just want to ask you a simple question. How is your soul? You probably haven't thought about that recently, at least not in those terms. You might have thought, well, how am I doing or how am I not doing? Certainly the beginning of a new year, you're thinking about the things that you want to put behind you and the new things that you want to do. I bet in all your resolving that very few of you have thought about how you want to care for your soul in the new year. But I just want to tell you, there are many things that are good and important about who you are, but none more so than your soul. And that's what I want to talk about today. So if you have a Bible and you'd like to, turn with me to the Gospel of Mark, Mark chapter 8. For those of you who were here for our prelude, you heard this earlier, but you'll hear it again. This time, as we go through, I'm going to unpack it a little bit. So just to give you kind of a backdrop before we start reading. So everything has kind of been up and to the right for Jesus up until this point. I mean, if you were looking at a graph, his ministry, his public ministry is booming. Wherever he goes, whatever town he goes into, there are crowds and crowds of people who surround him, primarily because they want something. Maybe more, they need something. Some of them are sick and they're troubled in their minds. They're needing to be set free. And they've tried doctors and they've tried the village shamans. They've tried a variety of different things. They've worshiped and sacrificed at the shrine of a variety of different gods, but to no avail. And when he comes, for many, he's their last hope. Some can't see, some can't hear, some are lame and can't walk. But news has traveled wherever he goes that this guy, there's something about him that wherever he goes, that the presence of God seems to rest on him in such a way that blind people can see, and deaf people can hear, and dead people can live again. So everything in Mark's gospel to this point is up and to the right. And of course, if you were like his disciples, you'd want in on that. You'd want a part of that. You'd want a piece of that, right? When you want to be a part of this guy's world, wherever he goes, he just makes life better for people. When you want to be a part of that? And so now they're going to this space If you're not familiar with Israel, Jesus basically set up his home base in the northern area of Israel, in and around the Sea of Galilee. Several of his disciples were from that area. Bethesda was a town that a few of them were from. And when we pick up the story, that's where they are. That's where they're camped out. But they're headed north. It's about 16 miles to be exact, to a town called Caesarea Philippi. In route, it's going to be a 32-mile round trip on foot. So it's no short trip. Now, Caesarea Philippi is a Roman colony. And the Orthodox rabbis of the day basically forbid and told their students that no good, God-fearing Jew would ever enter this town. It was a corrupt town. It was committed to the worship of many gods, but central to that was a god called Pan, who was half man, half goat. And many people who lived in that land worshipped and sacrificed at the altar of Pan. And so Jesus is going to take a field trip to Caesarea Philippi to Sin City. Now again, no self-respecting Jew should ever go to Caesarea Philippi. Wouldn't be caught dead in this place. As far as we know, this is the first and only time that he will go, but the reason I'm telling you this is because the backdrop matters with what's going to unfold in the story that you're going to hear. And so, as he makes his way to Caesarea Philippi, you might imagine as they enter the outskirts of the village that they would begin to see things that they might not have been familiar with in what was their hometown. They would see lots of idols and lots of shrines and lots of foreign gods that filled the land. And he's going to use this backdrop as he begins to speak to them about their soul, ultimately. So he's taking on a field trip to Sin City, and he's going to have the following discussion with them, and then towards the end he's going to engage a crowd of people who live there. So, Mark 8, beginning in verse 27. Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the village near Caesarea Philippi. And as they were walking along, he asked them, "So, who do people say that I am?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, and some say Elijah, and others say that you're one of the other prophets." But then he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter replied, "You're the Messiah." But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Two questions he asked. When we go from town to town to town to town, there's a great deal of buzz about me. And mostly I'm engaged with what I'm doing, so I don't really hear the buzz about me, but you do. You're in the crowds too. What are they saying about me? Who do they think that I am? And they say, "Well, some think you're John the Baptist." Now, what happened to John the Baptist? He was beheaded, right? He was killed. So some think that he's John the Baptist, resurrected with a new head. Right? Others think he was Elijah. What happened to Elijah when we last saw him in the pages of Kings? He was ushered off in a fiery chariot up into the heavens. He never died. So they think maybe he's returned. And some say, well, maybe he's not John the Baptist, maybe he's not Elijah, maybe he's one of the other prophets. In other words, this dude speaks with authority. When he speaks, people listen. He has a message. He's important. And they said, okay, fair enough. That's what they think. What do you guys think? Now, he's about halfway in. He's about a year and a half into his time with them. So he's just wanting to get a feel for what his closest friends and followers think. And of course, Peter is the first to respond, and he says, well, it's clear to me, you're the Messiah, the anointed one, the long-expected king. We've been waiting for you. And our hopes are placed on you because you're the one to come and purify Israel. You're the one to bring us a hope and the promise. All of the other prophets spoke of you. You're the one. You're the dude. You're the guy. I expect big things from you. And Jesus said, don't tell anybody. Isn't that weird? He's onto something. He's not John the Baptist. He's not Elijah. He's not one of the other prophets. He is the Messiah. But just don't tell anybody. I could speculate on why that is, but for the moment, there's no point. Apparently, though, it's not time for that piece of news to be revealed. There will be time. Now, as he's having this conversation in this town that we've talked about that's filled with idols and shrines and the worship of other false gods. Remember, this is their surrounding. This is the backdrop. As he's having the conversation with his disciples, he then wants to clarify what Peter said in terms of who the Messiah actually is, because Peter has an idea about what the Messiah is going to do. He's read the prophets. He's familiar. But Jesus is going to kind of make a left turn on him. And he's going to describe, for the first time, it will happen on 3 separate occasions. This is the first time in the Gospel of Mark that he's going to tell him about his passion or his imminent suffering and death. So he says, "Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead." As he talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. And Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, and then he reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You're seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's." So, Peter says, "You're the Messiah." And he's so proud of himself that he's seen this revelation and he understands, and he's right. He is the Messiah. He's got the title right, but he has the understanding of what the Messiah is to be wrong. He's been waiting for the Messiah so he could turn the tables and be the one who's in a position of power and authority. He's tired of having the Roman government rule and dictate and oppress him. He just wants a change. And he wants to be on the right side. He wants to be the one who's in power. And he's with the right guy. He's linked his life with who he believes he needs to in order for the tables and the tides to turn. And then Jesus goes and says, well, here's what's going to happen. You are right. I am the Messiah, but good times, they are not a-coming. I'm going to be persecuted, and I'm going to be killed. My life is going to be snuffed out. And Peter can't take this because it doesn't fit with what his image of a Savior looks like. Does it fit with yours? I've been waiting for years and years and years for you to arrive. And now once you arrive, you're going to tell me that this is what your future, and worse, what my future is? Because he knows that if it's good enough for Jesus, then it's got to be good enough for him. And that's not really what he signed up for. Remember, the first 8 chapters are up and to the right. Everything's good. But this piece of news, and so Peter's like... He pulls Jesus aside. He said, "It's Stop the nonsense. What are you talking about? You're going to scare the others. Right? Stop it. He's trying to talk him out of it. He's trying to talk Jesus out of his mission. And then he gets reprimanded. This has to be about the worst moment of Peter's life, although there are a couple other ones that may match this one. Because he doesn't refer to Peter by his name. He calls him what? Satan. He was so happy just moments ago when he was the one who identified him as the Messiah. It was such a high. I got it. It's like answering Final Jeopardy. He knew. And in a matter of moments, he's getting called Satan. So I want you to see what's going on here. Because Jesus is you're going to start to influence the others here with the strength of your character and your personality. And if you began to lead them away from the direction that I'm heading, basically your interests are self-serving, which means you're not following me, you're following a different Lord, which means it's the Lord who's trying to thwart every plan that I have. It's the Lord of the flies. It's Satan. It's our enemy, the enemies of our soul. So you're aligning yourself right now with one who has the exact opposite in mind of what I have in mind for you. So cut it out. Man, can you imagine being in that space and having Jesus speak those words to you? Must have cut him to the quick. Now, in Caesarea Philippi, with all the shrines and all of the idols and all of the temples that are dedicated to Pan and all of the other gods, people would go and make sacrifices for the purpose of what? For the purpose of getting what they wanted. It's the reason you make gods, isn't it? It's the reason you worship idols. In the hopes that they will give you exactly what you want. That's the backdrop, and he's telling Peter, I did not come to give you exactly what you wanted. I came to give you a new way, a different way, and it's going to rock your world. But it's the way that you were made to live. You just don't get it yet. So let me try and help explain it to you. And this is when he has the final piece of conversation with his disciples, but he calls all of the other inhabitants who have gathered in Sin City around to hear this. Then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? He's calling them to die. To die to what? Yourself, yes, but to anything and everything that has up to this moment previously defined your life. Because there's a lot of things that we allow to define us, aren't there? Our level of education, the job we get, the house we buy, the car we buy, the possessions we accumulate, the authority we have. There are a variety of things. If you were to look at and listen to your own heart for a moment, one of the most important questions you could ask yourself is, where have I aligned my identity? All you have to do is pay attention to what drives you. And you'll know where you are seeking or finding your identity. And what Jesus is saying to these guys is, if you want to be a disciple of mine, you're going to have to pick up an instrument of death. And you're going to have to bear it every day. Because every day there's going to be something inside of you that is pushing for a selfish way of living. And my way is not a self-centered way. It's a way of sacrifice. It's a way sometimes of suffering. It's a way of death. It is painful when you've identified yourself in a certain way, when you've been chasing a certain way of living, when you've been bowing at the shrine of these gods for your entire life because you wanted something, to give that up. So if you're going to follow me, sooner or later you're going to have to die. So pack your bags. Are you ready? Now, he's in Caesarea Philippi. He's invited a crowd of people who have no idea who he is. Yes, word has spread to the north. It's a hop, skip, and a jump away from Syria, so that gives you a little bit of the geography. He's outside of his own Israel now. And they're listening and they're hearing. And I don't think they know exactly what to make of this, because there's a part of him that's intriguing. He speaks with authority. He speaks with power. He's come. He's the Messiah, but he's calling them to die to everything that they have self-identified with up to this moment. So what do you do? What do you do? What do you do if you're there? He says to them, that's part of the deal. Part of the deal as you follow me is to surrender everything and anything that stands between you and the life you were made for. And he said, you know what? You can gather all of the stuff that you've been wanting for your entire life. You can accumulate all of your toys and possessions and have everything that your little heart has desired and still lose your soul. What happens when you lean your ladder up against the building that you've been trying to climb, and you get to the top and you realize, I've leaned my ladder up against the wrong building? I've spent my entire life pursuing and climbing and grasping and seeking these things. He says you can get to the top of that and have everything you thought you want, and your soul will be dead. You will have lost it. It's an important point to understand here that the soul, while it is eternal, it is also the most important thing about us as we live on planet Earth. And if we orient our lives around a way of living that does damage to our soul, eventually the light will go out. And will be nothing more than a bulb which has lost its energy and life force. We'll still be the bulb, but we just won't have the light. And he says the way that happens is you pursue a way that's different than the one that I call you to. I've come to reorient you to a new way. And so a lot of people don't, if he were a salesman, he's made a terrible pitch. Right? It's really terrible. I'm on the way to suffering and death, and so are you. Who's ready to go? Why would he do that? Because he's just up front being honest. He's not promising something like the other gods that can't deliver on those promises. He's going to deliver on his promises. He's going to give them life and life to the full. But it is going to involve some sacrifice, some suffering, and yes, some death. Why? Why do we have to die? Because there are things that we have aligned our life with along the way. There are idols that we have built up. There are other things that we have worshipped that has led us away from the life that is life, and it's killing us. It's doing damage to our souls. And we don't even know it. And he's telling Peter, listen, open your eyes and hear what it is that I'm saying to you. You think I've come to do this. I've not come to do that. I've not come to give you everything you wanted. I've come to give you a new way of living, and that way, when you live in it, will turn the light on inside of you. Our soul is the most important thing about who we are. It is the thing that makes us unique. It is the center of our being. It is our life force. How's your soul? Do you know that there are things right now in your life currently that are competing, that are wrestling against the health and life of your soul? And if you give in to them, if you allow them to stay, if you let them make their home, they are going to choke the life out of your soul. Some of us are just a husk of what we once were. This is just us, but we don't have our life force intact anymore. And it's because we've been bowing at the altar of Pan. We've been pursuing stuff that we thought would give us happiness and joy. And it's just left us wanting. And Jesus says, you just need to die to that stuff. Because you can accumulate and amass the entire world. You can have all the power and authority and riches and toys. You can have all of the exterior, but if your interior collapses in on yourself, what good is it? The reason I ask you to get a copy of the bulletin is because there's an insert that I wanted you to see. I'm not going to walk through it all now because we're about done for today. But what I'd like for you to do today, like, don't put this away and wait until sometime later in the week because you're going to forget it and you're going to lose it. But this is a little exercise for you to ask yourself 8 questions that are going to give you a sense of the state of the health of your soul. Next week, if you're able to come back, I'm going to give you instruction about how you actually can care for and nurture and protect and guard your soul, because it's the most important thing about you. Today we're talking about the danger of losing soul. Next week I'm going to tell you about how you can prioritize the care of your soul, how you can have life and life to the full. So I hope you'll come back. Now, the one thing that I want to point you to is on the first part of the page where it says, how is it with your soul? There are 2 questions that are asked at the top, and then there are 2 lines where it has a scale always to never. Understand that after number 1, this scale should come up and go underneath that, and then 1 will come under 2. It's just a misprint. But it's right in all the other times. I want you to honestly ask yourself these questions and then circle where you find yourself on the scale. And then next week, I want you to come back and I want you to bring this with you. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Some of you might be in a place where you are healthy. Your soul is alive and vibrant and you feel good. And I would say, God bless you. Continue to do the things that align you with the Christ life. When you are aligned in your life with the teachings and the ways of Christ, you will have a healthy soul. But if you find that you're somewhere on the scale that you don't want to be, I hope you will come back, because I'm going to give you some practical instruction about what it means to guard your soul, to protect your soul, to care for and nurture your soul. It's the most important thing about you. And if you learn to do that, I can tell you your life will be better. Will there be sacrifice and death along the way? Yes, there will be. Why? Because there are always things that are tugging at you to pull you away from the Christ life. But I want to help keep you in line with what He has for you. Okay? So answer that sometime today when you have like 10 minutes of just quiet, and just honestly answer, not where you want to be, but where you find yourself today. Okay? Last thing. Last week, and I asked earlier during our prelude how many of you were here last week, and we walked through 3 questions, right, last week. So if you weren't here, let me just quickly tell you what they were. We talked about entering and exiting doors, that doors open and take us to new places. And I asked you, I said, when you walk through those doors back there, what is it that you bring with you as you bring yourself into the worship experience? We looked at the wise men and what they brought on their journey to the King, to Jesus, and how they brought the gold, the frankincense, and myrrh, and they opened up their treasure chest and they gave from the overflow of their best. And I invited you, when you walk through those doors every Sunday, to come and bring your best. It might not be, you might not be at 100%, you might be at 20%, but the best of what you have, to bring it and to offer it as an act of worship. The second thing I said was, also, after you've brought your best, there may be places of need inside of you where you open up, you make yourself vulnerable so that you can receive what God has for you today. Okay? That was the second piece. The last piece is this, and I want to invite you to do it again today. We're going to do this for a while. Okay? So in your bulletin, there is a star. It could be blue or it could be yellow. Just depends. Neither one of them is more important than the other. The last question that I asked is, when you leave this place, what are you going to take out of here? See, we don't hoard our blessing. We're blessed to be a blessing to other people. There are going to be some people today in your family that you have an interaction with that are going to need something from you that is better than what you would otherwise give them. There's going to be friends, people that you bump into, maybe people you don't even like. And I want to challenge you as we finish our time together. I want you to write on that star, and I want you to post it on that door as you leave. It's your last gift as a reminder. Here's what I'm taking. I can suggest a couple things for you to take. Let me suggest that you pick up your cross and take it with you when you leave. Because there are going to be places today that you are going to need to die to your own ego to avoid a conversation that's not going to be helpful between you and your wife, you and your son, you and your daughter, you and your husband, you and somebody else. You're going to have to pick up your cross. You're going to have to make a sacrifice so that you don't blast them, so that you don't demean them, so that you don't diminish them, so that you don't do something that damages their life force. You could take out into this world through those doors a commitment to caring for your soul, a different commitment than maybe you've had in the previous months and year. You could take a word of kindness with you. You could take gracefulness. You could take patience with you. There might be something that you receive through the singing of a song, through our prayers, through our blessings, through our teachings, through the Word. Something today I hope you will take, and I hope it will propel you into a way of living that aligns yourself with Christ. I'm charging you to be little Christ wherever you go. What will you take with you when you leave these doors? You're going to have ample opportunity. People are going to do things and say things to you that aren't right. They're going to be hurtful. And you're going to have a chance to respond in kind, or you're going to have a chance to do something that Christ would do. And I'm inviting you to write on that star and place on that post what it is that you're taking from here. Okay? Be thoughtful. Be intentional. Be Christ to those you meet. If you would stand. May I bless you in the same way that I did our little children. My heart swells with pride over you. I'm thankful for each and every one of you and the life that you live. You don't always get it right. You don't always do it great, but you're trying. And that means something. You haven't given up. You haven't lost hope. And I bless you in Jesus' name. The journey is hard, but it's worth it. Keep seeking the way of the Christ, and you will know life to the full. And when you know life to the full, then you can give life to the full to everyone around you, not because they deserve it, but because they need it. So I bless you in Jesus' name. Be people of grace and peace, okay? Have a great week.